So what are some easy ways to bring contrast into your home? Well, stay tuned to find out what they are. Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about contrast and how to think about that when we're designing our rooms. And contrast is one of the design principles. So, the design principles are a guide, reminders for us to what to think about and what to incorporate into our rooms to make sure that the room turns out well. And so contrast is a really important principle to incorporate and to use in our rooms to make sure that we have variety. So it has a lot to do with variation in a room so that a room doesn't just look all the same. And there's always this relationship with contrast and repetition because we want repetition because repetition is really important in creating a cohesive look where we have different elements in a room that are being repeated. But the other part of that, the other contrast to that is contrast because we don't want everything to be the same. We want to have some contrast in a room. So it's really important to, have that be a part of a room. And we can have, a very subtle contrast or a very high contrast in a room. And that really depends on, the look and feel that you're going for. But I have a couple of ways that you can incorporate contrast into your room. So let's take a look at those. So one way to add contrast into a room is to think about value. And value just has to do with the lightness or darkness of something. And lots of times we think of color, lighter or darker colors. But this has to do with everything, every type of material in our home. And using, darker and lighter versions of different materials, including color, is a way to add contrast to a room. So in a kitchen that we have, a lot of white going on. White is the brightest and lightest. And contrasting that with the opposite of that, with the darkest tone, black, is a great way to add contrast. And that's high contrast, a very light color with a very dark color. But at the same time, it adds, some variation to a room. And so just by adding, a darker countertop or a darker backsplash or, tile area above a cooktop or even an island, creating that in a dark color, a dark tone, creates a lot of variety and is an easy way to add contrast to the room. A more subtle way is where we use, lighter and darker tones as well as midtones. And I think this bathroom is a good example of that. We have, the bright white of a countertop and of the sink and even the tub and trim on the wall. But then there's this midtone of that gray pink color. And then the darkest part of that room is the vanity cabinet. And, we may not see those subtle variations right away, but say if we were to, gray out this photo, so we don't have any color, we're not thinking about color anymore, we can easily see, okay, the darkest part of that room is the cabinet, and then there's some mid-tone, lightness and darkness, and then the lightest part is easily seen from the countertop or the tub and sink. And, that's a good way to use contrast, use it in a couple different ways. Use it in a lightest, darkest, but also like a mid-tone. And that's a more subtle way of creating, variation in a room. And then, of course, a great way of providing contrast to a room is just by adding another color. So we can, look at this bathroom and, how awesome that is just to use a different color on the vanity cabinet. And right away, it adds more variation to that room. We can also think about accent walls. I mean, right away, that adds some variation to a room just by adding a different color on one of the walls. Or even an accent chair is a great example of that, where, we have an accent chair that's different than, the sofa. It's a different color. So just using color, adding a different color automatically adds contrast and creates a more interesting look. And then another way to add contrast to a room is just to think about different materials and different textures. And so, one way to add some contrast to, say, a bedroom where you want to have a very soft look, and maybe you're using tone on tone, just one color, or just, very soft variations of a color. And one way to add some contrast is just to make sure to bring in different types of fabric, different textures of fabric, so that there's a little bit of contrast going on and a little bit of variation. And then another way to do that is just using a totally different material. So I like in this dining room, they have this really wonderful wood table, but instead of using wood chairs, they are using metal chairs. Just right away, it creates some contrast. There's different materials going on. And even that metal chair is repeated in that sideboard or console table that they have. And so just by mixing up the materials, that's really essential to create a more interesting look. So, what are some takeaways that we can think of when we're thinking about contrast and adding contrast to the rooms in our homes? Well, one thing is just to go with the look and feel that you're going for. A subtle contrast for something that's calm and peaceful, or more high contrast for a room where you want more energy and variation. And then, just use color or lightness and darkness, or even different materials and textures to create that contrast. And those are, some easy ways to do that. And then, in your busy day, take a moment and just take notice of one of your rooms and notice if there's enough contrast going on in there. Is there enough variation? And if not, what can you do using color or lightness and darkness, or even different materials to kind of change it up a bit? And then let me know what you think of when you're using contrast in, the design of your home and how you use it. So I'd love to hear your design ideas and suggestions in the comments. And I want to thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.